exciting to look to the future of UNO, what it might be like in times to come. Sometimes, though, it's important to stop and take a good look at the past of the university, the people and the happenings that help make the excitement of future history possible. With this in mind, join me for Reflections in Time. Well, it's a beautiful day in August, the summer of 1986. More than that, we're in a lovely apartment on the 20th floor of the Masonic Manor, which isn't too far distant from what was the University of Omaha and which is now the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And what we're doing is something we've been doing for a number of years. We're preparing a series of tapes for the university which we call Reflections in Time. And what we've been doing over the years, and it's been very interesting for me in working with this, is to talk to a great variety of people and to reflect on the life and times of people and the University of Omaha and the University of Nebraska Omaha in the years that they were here. And the apartment, this lovely apartment I mentioned just a moment ago that we're sitting in very comfortably, is that of Frances Edwards, who has spent much of her life in the area around the university, and more importantly for us, spent a number of years at the university, both as a student and then as a clinical psychologist in more recent years. Frances, it's certainly nice to be able to visit with you.
Well, thank you, Paul.
You have a lovely home here.
Oh, it's just perfect. You just couldn't ask for anything better.
You seem so comfortable in it, and we're so happy to be here with you. Now, what I want to find out from you, and I don't know that I've ever asked you this in our visits, and you and I have known each other for a lot of years now. Where did life all begin for you and your family? Right here, near this place in Omaha?
Oh, no, we've lived in many homes in Omaha. My father was a person who bought lovely homes and then fixed them up and sold them.
What did your father do?
My father was employed by the federal government.
Oh.
And moved to many different positions whenever he was requested to.
But did he and you make your life always in Omaha, or were there other towns and cities too?
Oh, no. Our father was, my father's parents came from Wales by sailboat, and the unusual thing they did was come up the St. Lawrence River, and they were taken off the boat at Montreal.
Is that right?
And they crossed the country from there in covered wagon and horseback. And we still own the farm at Red Oak, Iowa, which his family purchased.
Did they homestead there?
They didn't homestead, they bought the land. And we still, at this time, that land is now giving scholarships to 6 or more each year, and I cannot tell you because we have a foundation as a family, and our foundation gave, I can't even tell you how many students were under it last year. Because
but there have been a number of them, haven't there?
Oh, we've been doing this since '76.
Oh my, that's wonderful.
And the foundation has, I couldn't tell you how many have had university help.
Now, this is very interesting about coming over on a sailboat and a covered wagon. What kind of frame and time are we talking about here, Frances? Is this in the 1850s or something like that, or 60s, or
something along that level? But I just didn't know what you were going to talk about today, and I didn't think about getting my father's date.
Oh, yeah, no, the dates aren't that important, but it's just interesting. So, this family farm over near Red Oak, was that the place where a number of you began life then?
No.
Or is that in the previous family?
The previous family, my father's family. But after my father came to Omaha, he married Margaret Evans, and her father was taken prisoner in the Civil War and was in Vicksburg in prison for 4 years about.
Yes, right.
And their pictures are over there on the wall.
Now, that's really of interesting historical significance. That was back, and now we're talking about the 1860s, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So your roots and your family's roots in the Omaha area really go back many, many years.
And we still retain our family farm because that is what is part of the basic financing of our foundation for gifted students.
So that's still an operational farm, and it's in the family, and
sure.
over in the Red Oak area. Most interesting. Well, now as a little girl, and you and your sisters and your family here in Omaha, where'd you go to school?
Oh, we went to many schools. Lake, which is now up in the near north side.
Yes.
And we were all graduates. Even our mother was a graduate of Central High School.
Everybody went to Central. A high school with a great past and tradition, yes. So the whole family really went Central. Then after high school, what happened to you, Frances? Did you go to work, or did you continue to go to school? Or?
Dr. Jenkins was the first pastor I can remember seeing preaching in the pulpit. And of course, Dr. Jenkins, I can remember going to the Jenkins home with my father. Now, I do not know what Dr. Jenkins and my father had business to talk about.
But now, were you members of his parish? Was he a parish pastor here?
He did not have a church here.
Oh.
He was the head of the Presbyterian Seminary.
Which eventually turned into, the university. Yeah.
That was, and Dr. Jenkins had the feeling that the seminarian boys were not getting a broad enough education.
A little too narrow?
And, well, there was too much theological. And so he decided to begin a university, and this was considerably, I must have been about 7 or 8 years old when I sat on Dr. Jenkins' lap, and Annie, his daughter, sat on his other knee. And we visited, but I just cannot tell you why we were at his home. But my father and Dr. Jenkins were very close friends because they were, of course, Welsh.
So their Welsh background helped perhaps bring them together, and they got together socially in effect,
My father was born at Aberystwyth, Wales. And I cannot remember where Dr. Jenkins was born.
But in the same general area of England, so they had something in common to talk about the homeland, really, and where the family came from.
He was in this country longer than my parents, earlier than my parents.
Was that right?
Because he went to Princeton. I remember that.
Graduate of Princeton Seminary and so on?
I think so. And Dr. Jenkins was a very kindly person, and anyone who happened to be in that area of living, was his friend.
So it sounds like, from what you described here, Frances, that yes, he was a very pleasant, easy to get to know, nice man.
Very fine. And the seminary was a real large brick building, and I think it was on Florence Boulevard.
I remember that. I used to live near it in my first years here in Omaha. Then, of course, it was an apartment area, not a seminary anymore. But I remember the Presbyterian Seminary building. Yes, a large brick building. So it was preparing men for the ministry in the Presbyterian Church. And do you recall, and this is unfair because you were such a little girl when some of these things happened, but I think it's fantastic remembering being with Dr. Jenkins. Do you remember the university getting started?
I remember because my sisters were 10 years older than I, and they were in the group that the young people of our neighborhood went together. And I wish that you would look up the class of 1908.
Intend to.
Because I think that was the group that were friendly with my sisters, and our home was open to the young people, and we had a grand piano, and the young people loved to come there and visit.
You know, before we started to make this tape, you showed me this piece of paper with these names on it, and I wish you'd mention them and tell a little what you remember of each of them that you felt was rather remarkable about these quite important people, ultimately, that were a part of the university in those very early days.
Well, Stanton Salisbury was a very, very fine young man, and if I recall correctly, he was at Pearl Harbor, and he went on, in his years, he became the head person in
was he a chaplain?
No, he was the director or head person in the chaplain's school for the United States Navy.
Oh.
And I do not know anything about any of the people who lived after him and his family. His brothers were Hiram and Howard, and I knew them well. Now then, Harry Jerome was a very brilliant person, and I know that he went to the University of Wisconsin. And
after he'd been at the University of Omaha.
After he had a degree from the University of Omaha. And then he went on to become financial advisor to the President of the United States during the First World War.
President Wilson.
I wouldn't know, but I remember that's what Harry's interest became. Now, George Percival lived right on our street, so I knew him well.
Oh, he was a neighbor.
Yes. And he was very bright, and he went on, and I'm sure that he became the pastor at the largest Presbyterian church in Denver.
My word, what an illustrious class.
Yes, and then there was a girl named Pansy, but I can't remember her.
Was it Pansy Williams?
Pansy Williams, and she married an Omaha attorney, and his name was Daniels, and they were very prominent people throughout their older lives. Another one in that time was George Percival. George lived rather near us, although I was a small child. He was in high school, and he finally became the owner and publisher of a newspaper in Illinois, a town paper. And now those five or six I remember, and there were 2 or 3 more in that class. And it was by the beginning, the University of Omaha, with this small group under Dr. Jenkins and the other gentlemen who taught at the Presbyterian Seminary, gave their time and started the University of Omaha.
Both things are so interesting. What you're saying, really, Frances, is that they started the university in some measure to broaden the education of people who were going into the ministry.
That's right.
And then beyond that, in one of the first classes, when the student body was small enough to fit into this sofa practically, they had all these illustrious people at one time.
They did.
Marvelous.
And I think if you'll go back in the records, you'll find that there were about 8 or 10 in that class, and they all went to national fame.
Well, in the percentage way, I'm quite sure the university can never do that again.
What they did.
No. Now, that was a very pleasant and important memory you shared with us there of your time with Dr. Jenkins when you were a little girl and your families got together. Now, your sisters, a bit older than you, went to the university then in some of the very early years, really.
They did not go directly because they had other opportunities.
Oh.
And so every one of us have gone to the university, but they went later in life.
I see. But you remember, I suppose, the first memories you have of the physical presence of the university would be up
at Reddick Hall.
Yeah, that was a lovely building, wasn't it? A big home of the Reddick family,
yes,
wasn't
the
it?
Reddick family.
And they gave it to the university?
As far as I know. As far as I know.
Do you remember anything about it? Was it filled? Did they make it into classrooms? What was it like?
I don't think they changed anything.
They left it pretty much.
The chemistry laboratory was just in the kitchen, and the classrooms were the living room and the what was called the parlor at that time. And I cannot even remember how many men taught at the university or how many students were there, but it was very important to this group because we were family friends and wanted it to succeed.
And I should imagine in those early years there were a lot of questions whether or not it could succeed.
Oh, they had a terrible time heating the building at times. And my father, I can remember once that he went out and got fuel and sent it in so that the next day's students would be warm.
I think it was Dr. Thompson, when we were talking on a tape like this a few years ago, talked about students bringing coal literally with them.
I don't remember that.
That was in about 1912 or so, when I believe he was a student there. So those early times were kind of tough financially to just make it go. They had little money and the student body was small.
And they had a very outstanding faculty.
Yeah, I had heard that.
That's the thing that really no one ever realizes how those wonderful men gave their time to youth.
Now, did this happen because they were illustrious theologians and a part of the Presbyterian seminary, or did Dr. Jenkins draw them after the university started? How did that come about in your memory?
As I recall, they were at the seminary, and they just shared their time with these students at the university, and they taught different things. I've been trying to recall there was one man in particular, but I don't remember who he was and what his name was. But he gave a great deal of time with Dr. Jenkins.
Really, the faculty, though, in the early years gave their time. They were not really paid to teach at the University of Omaha.
They were paid at the seminary. Yeah. And they did this to broaden the experiences of the seminarians. And,
of course, in the years you're describing here, Frances, the university was a private school, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
A church school, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had chapel every day.
Did you? Yeah. Were you required to attend?
No, but they sang hymns and played the piano well, and there was a great deal of happiness brought through religion.
Yes. Did you go there because this was a school of your faith, or did you go for other reasons? Was there something special you wanted to study, Frances?
No, we went just because it was near and we could walk to it, and our parents were interested in it. And but you see, I was a long time after the early classes.
Yeah, but it was still up in North Omaha.
Oh, it was still at the same spot.
Yeah, when you came there as a student a few years later than your sisters had, what kind of arrangement? You mentioned the Reddick House. Were there other buildings then, too, by that time?
Ma gave money, and they built, and she built...
Who was it?
Ma. I cannot spell it for you.
All right.
And she had a son who died, and she gave the gymnasium. And I do not know how the corner building on 24th and Pratt was financed. But I do know that when that building was built, they knew they could not stay there very long because there was not enough opportunity for increasing the buildings. And so they put in a building that had plumbing that the building could be made into small apartments with the plumbing was in when the building was built.
Yeah. So they planned ahead.
They had foresight. Every penny that was spent in a way that it would make it succeed later.
That sounds very far-sighted on the part of those that were involved in those early tough years. Did you like it there? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, everybody enjoyed it.
Why? Was it because of the teachers, the camaraderie? What was it?
It was because of the good satisfaction and conduct of the group. Really, I never knew any misbehavior in classes. We had no students who were behavior cases.
Now, the students that you just mentioned, yourself and others, you said that you could walk to school, and that's one reason you went there. Did most of the students in that small student body in those early years
come
from
all over town?
All over town. And I suppose they came mainly by streetcar. Did the streetcar come close by?
The streetcar ran right in front of the university.
That was important in those days, wasn't it?
Yes.
To have that kind of transportation.
And there was a period of time, and I cannot tell you when that was, that the student body became large enough to need more space, and so they had a public school building that was no longer used at 24th and Ames.
Yeah, fairly close by, but a little ways away.
Yes, but they could walk there. And I think they had that for a science building.
Yeah, you were mentioning that the laboratory was in the kitchen in the Reddick house.
In the Reddick house.
So they certainly needed more space than that.
Yes.
So then they got a building over 24th and Ames they could use mainly for science.
That's right.
Well, now, things were getting bigger. Was that building in use when you were a student, or was that a little later?
No, that was when I was a student. It wasn't right at the beginning.
Well, when you went there as a student, did you know then, Frances, what you wanted to do in life, or were you just wanted to go to college?
The classes they presented.
There weren't too many electives?
No.
Just
there were pretty much requirements. You had to take English, you had to take math, you had to take science. And as it developed, why, you did not choose. You were pretty much in a scholarship situation where requirements. There was an interesting thing happened. Dr. Mary Bates Fox was there. Now, my sisters and I both, Dorothy and I were there together. We wanted to have an arts degree,
liberal arts.
Liberal arts
humanities
degree. But you also had some opportunity for electives. I took kindergarten, primary choice.
Were you thinking a little bit of teaching at that time, maybe?
Well, yes, I imagine we were, because we both made teachers' degrees. education degrees.
Oh, they gave an education degree at that time.
They gave a degree that you could that you got a. I'm sorry, but I just destroyed diplomas and other things that were from the university. But out of that came the opportunity. This Dr. Mary Bates Fox was invited to teach in the outdoor kindergarten, outdoor play school at Berkeley.
Outdoor school?
It was an all-outdoor school. And the year I was must have been a junior, I was invited by Dr. Bates, Mary Bates Fox, to go to California with her. And of course, we received, for our time, we received scholarship. We did not have to pay for our tuition.
You had
But other than that, we had to carry our own degrees.
So your scholarship,
And
your tuition was paid?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I got to go to California, to Berkeley, with her for the summer school.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, it was just wonderful.
Quite different, I imagine, from what you were used to.
And,
were they rather innovative out there with outdoor kindergarten and everything?
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
And my sister Dorothy and I both were able to get enough credits in, so we were able to leave the campus at midterm, and we did not want to get away from our classes. We wanted to get our diplomas with our classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took 4 o'clock classes. And I remember one of them was choir, but I can't remember what else. And in that way, why we stayed with the university in part to the June time for commencement.
You were rather close to your classmates and wanted to end with them.
And I think everybody who went there was.
Yeah. Well, the class was small. You had good feeling and rapport among your friends.
I just don't remember too much about the seminary because it was over on 20th Street.
Yeah, it was a ways away from where you were, wasn't it?
It was quite a distance.
But it was still operational then when you were a student? It was still going on?
Some of them, yes. There were men from the, of course they were all men in the seminary, and Dr. Jenkins spent his time between the two buildings.
Do you remember any of the faculty or any of the people that were your teachers that stand out in memory? It's a long time ago, I know, Frances, but do you remember some of them that might have stood out that you really thought a lot of?
Flora Buck was the one in charge of the English department, and she was very, very young but very demanding. And Dr. Jenkins, of course, and another person that I recall was Miss Kate McHugh, who had been principal at Omaha Central High School. Her brother was a judge here in Omaha. They lived on Dodge Street, and they were outstanding people in giving their service at the university.
What sorts of things did she teach?
Oh, Shakespeare, and I remember taking a course in novels, and she did something different every year.
But as time went along, did you have then, as you described a while ago, more electives, more choice of some of the things you might take?
They changed every year, really.
But you had to take them in certain years.
Yes.
They weren't always offered every year necessarily.
I took a course in, it was in the kindergarten department in nature, and I bet I know more about flowers and birds and just the immediate area, because they made it so interesting.
Yeah, well, you still love flowers, as evidenced by this beautiful African violet that we have between us here.
Well, that's thanks to my aunt.
Now, after your years at the university as a student, what happened next for you, Frances?
Well, the day I stopped university in the daytime, and I was called by Miss Bell Ryan, who was superintendent of schools, and I think, if I recall correctly, that I will not be able to say who was the superintendent of schools at that time.
No, that's all right.
And I was called in the very first day I was out of school to teach kindergarten.
Is that right? So there wasn't any waiting time.
And I never applied for it. I never looked for it. I never did anything but was called in to take a position.
Sounds like you were a pretty good student, Frances.
Well, you don't get through university in 3.5 years if you don't apply yourself.
No, so you'd worked hard, and right away there was a job for you. And you started to teach kindergarten.
Yes.
Did you like that?
I loved it. But I played the piano well. I sang. I really had a whole period of time when I was a soprano soloist in Omaha.
Oh, is that right?
And I was the first one to ever sing at Jocelyn Memorial.
Is that right?
Mrs. August Borglum accompanied me, and there was the Jocelyn had put an organ in the Jocelyn Memorial, but it did not function correctly for the sounds there.
Oh, is that right?
And that had to be removed, and it was unfortunate. I can't remember the exact year that was.
But you did the first concert.
I did the first concert at Jocelyn.
Oh, it's a beautiful hall, and it still is. And now there's a lovely piano there given by you and your foundation, isn't there?
Well, I gave the piano personally.
Did you? Well, you have a lot of pleasant memories then of Jocelyn.
Oh, yes, Jocelyn. We just had it. Of course, we knew the Jocelyn.
I was going to ask you, they, of course, for those of us in the 70s and 60s and 80s, didn't know them, but you did.
Yes, we did.
Did you know the Jocelyn Castle when it was a home?
Yes, I did.
What a lovely place that must have been.
And there was an unusual thing. They gave it to the Board of Education for an office building. And my sisters and I were invited to be hostesses the night it was shown to the city of Omaha. And I will tell you one thing that was different about Jocelyn Castle than anything else. Mrs. Jocelyn had a long hall, was for closet off her rooms, and she had heads to put her hats on. Of course, that was the day everybody wore a hat. And in the hats, in the holes in the head, there were holes to take care of her jewelry. And her hats were placed over these holes so that the
mannequins were jewel boxes then.
They sure were.
Oh, that's unusual.
Yes, it was very unusual.
It must have been a wonderful place, a beautiful
I'll
place.
never forget that beautiful colored glass small picture on the west wall of Jocelyn. You go down and I think you can see it now.
Yes, I've seen it, I think, many times. And wasn't there a lovely organ in the place? And it was,
yes, the organ was adequate for the home.
And a place to have large gatherings and dances on the top floor?
Yes, on the top floor.
A ballroom, yeah.
Yes.
It must have been the showplace of the city, really.
Oh, I think it was at that time.
Were they an interesting family?
They did not have any children, but they had an adopted daughter, I think. I think if my recollection is correct. And by the time I was around, she lived in the East.
Well, they left a wonderful memory in the form of that beautiful museum, which in turn has the concert hall that you performed in.
We're very worried about it. You know, the Jocelyn Memorial Building is it should be granite. But I don't know, it's what stone it is, but it is causing some trouble at this time. It's beginning to show some deterioration, and I've had occasion to talk with Mr. Robert there and others, and I don't know what's going to be done, but they're going to try and do something.
Well, let's hope they do. Now let's come back to the University of Omaha. You are out and you're teaching now. You're a kindergarten teacher. When did you get tied over into the university? How did that come about?
Well,
as something beyond a student, of course, which you had been.
You see, there was no clinical psychologist at that time in Omaha, And I cannot, it was in the 40s. So you see, it was
Early
quite
40s.
a bit later. Why, my sister Dorothy became the first one interested in going to Columbia, New York City. And then we all ended up going to Columbia, New York City. And I had my master's when I went there. So I just took the classes that were interesting to me, but I did have probably some of the best contacts with psychologists of that time. And there were very few people that got to have a personal acquaintance with Dr. Henry Goddard, who was the director of Vineland, New Jersey, and there was another institution back there where they developed testing for the feeble-minded, and I got to meet him and he was from Ohio State where Dr. Thompson had gone. And I also got to know Dr. Well, he was from Stanford University, and he was interested in the gifted, and I got to study with both Dr. Goddard and this gentleman from Leland Stanford, and so that was what took me into the area of clinical psychology.
That really piqued your interest, took you out of kindergarten and teaching areas and into psychology, really.
Yes.
Then did you come back to the university from there?
Yes.
And did you go to work as a teacher right away?
I had made a master's at the University of Omaha.
You got your master's from the university here?
Sure. And I had my master's when I had the opportunity. We were rather, I guess you would call us university bums, because my sister Ruth went to Madison, Wisconsin. We all went to Laramie, Wyoming. I went to Berkeley. Dorothy and Ruth went to the Broadmoor Art Academy in Colorado Springs.
Oh,
my sister Winifred, of course, went to the law school that was attached to the University of Omaha through the efforts of the Fisher family.
Yes, I know Margaret and I visited about that. That was here for a few years, and they attended that, huh?
Yes, and it was just one of those things where there were classes we liked to go while we went.
So you just enjoyed going to school, really?
Yes, I never had any desire not to go to a class.
Wonderful. Both a teacher and a student, huh?
After I got to teaching, it never bothered me a particle to teach.
You really liked teaching?
Yes.
And that was quite a change for you, going from kindergarten to the university level, wasn't it?
Well, it didn't make too much difference to me because I was interested in human development.
Now,
see, of course, for a long time, our clinic at the university was the only one between Chicago and the West.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that clinic. When I first got to know you, you were so heavily involved with that clinic.
Yeah.
Now, weren't you and Dr. Thompson, did you start that together? How did that come about?
That came about because Dr. Thompson and Homer Anderson, who went to Yale from Omaha, had lunch one day, and they talked about opening a children's clinic in Omaha. And Dr. Anderson, who was the superintendent of the Omaha schools, asked Dr. Thompson to come to his office with him after the luncheon at the Omaha Club or wherever they were. And so without too much effort, I was financed by the Omaha Public Schools. Dr. Thompson was financed by the university, and we were the first two staff members.
Is that right?
And there was an agreement between those two tax-supported institutions to match their amounts of money that they put in. And that's the way it grew.
And now, wasn't your mission as a clinic to test a lot of children in the Omaha Public Schools, right?
Yes, we were really, I was really financed by the Board of Education. And Dr. Thompson was financed by the university, and we had just perfect accord, and there was so much concern about it that we even had 2 attorneys.
Is that right?
Yes.
Now this must have built a nice bridge between the university community and the public schools.
Oh, it did. It was, Dr. Thompson was always well known in the public schools.
Now, I think it's time for you and me. We've talked about this, the university. We've talked about some of your early years. What I'd like to have you share with us now, and you mentioned him. Let's start with him, then we can go from there. You mentioned Dr. Jenkins a while ago, but Dr. Thompson. Let's talk about some of the people in your memory that really stand out, that relate to education, and more specifically to the University of Omaha.
Well, Dr. Gorman was a wonderful person over there.
Yes.
It's hard to bring to names.
I'll throw a few at you, maybe. How about Dr. Earl?
Oh, Dr. Earl was math, head of the math department, and he was very, very close to Dr. Thompson. They were together a great deal of time for their recreational activities, and Margaret, I believe, is still living.
Yes, and later this summer she and I are going to do a tape just like you and I are right now.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, you give her my love when
you're here,
because I don't get a chance to hear from her.
She seems to be quite well, and I'll certainly
Is she living
hear.
in Omaha still?
Yes, she is, and she spends her summers up at the lake. All right, Dr. Earl, Dr. Thompson, Charlie Hoff. Does he ring any bell with you,
yes,
the business manager?
He was a business manager, and I believe he died.
He did.
Right during his time that he served the university.
But he was a strong force for the university in its financial things.
Yes.
How about Dr. Bale? Do you have some memories of him?
Oh, I remember Dr. Bale, but I was sort of, so you don't know what it is to be a clinical psychologist and teach for the university too, and so I was pretty busy when he was about, and I do remember they had a meeting. It was a special service for the university at Trinity Cathedral, where I joined in 1918.
Is that right?
So I've been a member there a long time.
For a long time, yes.
And you'll find that, well, anyway, was it Dr. Bale who lost his wife?
Yes, he did a few years ago.
We wanted to see to it that Mrs. Bale had a real good place to sit. And so we arranged at Trinity Cathedral that she was to sit with our family. And she sat on the aisle, I remember very well, and got to see a truly high church. You know, Trinity Cathedral is over 100 years old.
Is that right?
I'm sure it's 100 years old.
And you belonged to it for a good number of those years.
Yes, I have. And a pathetic thing happened was that we were all together at this church service in the morning, and I think Mrs. Bale died that night.
Is that right?
I think she became ill at the university.
It was rather sudden, as I recall.
Yes, it was.
Now, other people that you think of that stand out, as you developed the clinic, were there some people that were helpful other than, of course, you and Dr. Thompson? You did most of the work at first with the other people involved?
Well, we did all of it. Well,
no wonder you were busy.
Well, we had, you see, there was no one to teach clinical testing, and so we started classes right away, and to have extra help while we opened up. I don't know if you know, Dr. Thompson designed that one-way vision room that has been taken out of there.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
Did he?
And my office had one wall was open. It was dark glass, and we had a speaker system so that classes could be carried on in the next room with Dr. Thompson lecturing, and the student that I was testing could be seen and heard at all times.
Isn't that was innovative in the years that you did
it? That
it?
was during the time that we were there.
It sounds to me, Frances, like through much of your life, although you didn't always teach kindergarten, you maintained a love and relationship with children.
Oh, I've always enjoyed children.
What are
I
some?
Still do.
Yeah. What are some of the, as you look back on all those years in education and with the university, there must have been a lot of satisfaction in the kind of work that you did.
You may not realize it, but people didn't at that time stop to think about satisfaction. They were busy and served whatever assignment they had, and they did not think about satisfaction.
Yeah, the loads that you handled were very heavy, weren't they?
I even had my sisters at times bought dresses for me, and because I was so
didn't
busy.
Have time to shop.
Yeah, just didn't care for it even.
Well, as the clinic developed then at the university that you were so involved with, did you eventually get more help, or did you keep doing most of the work?
Right from the first year on, we got more money, and that was what built it. When the Board of Education would pay more, the university would pay more. And in that way, I really think that department had more people make PhDs in their advanced years in university than any other section of the school for a long time.
Now, was the clinic always attached to the liberal arts and science, or was it a part of the College of Education with Dean Gorman?
No, it was with the arts department.
So it always maintained really with Dr. Thompson?
Yes,
that sort
absolutely.
of thing. Well, as you look back over all those years, Frances, it sounds as though you had a very enjoyable but hard time. You worked hard.
Well, we were busy, but we didn't think about hard work. It was our lives. We enjoyed it.
Well, I think we visited for about long enough, and I want to thank you sincerely, Frances, for taking time and allowing us to come and visit with you in your lovely home.
Well, I'm glad you could come. I'm sorry I'm so slow, but I'm unable to move very fast because of arthritis.
Well, but your mind moves very well, and we're pleased that you were willing to share some of these marvelous memories with us about the university and about your family and other things.
If I think of something more, I'll write it down and then phone you.
And we can add it. And we thank you for today and for the future, too, and best of everything to you and years ahead.
It's nice for you to come and to see me.
Thank you.
Thank you.